let's talk about these lifestyle interventions and what you have found, particularly low-hanging fruit. We can start with the things that are probably the easiest things that people can start to implement into their life. And then obviously we'll go into a little bit more complex as we go on. But what have you found to be most effective strategies for people to improve their brain health?
Yeah, so foundations are going to be the same that you've heard other places: diet, exercise, sleep, and stress management. And then there's the medical piece of identifying toxins, nutrient imbalances, stressors, structural issues, genetic issues, signaling issues, infections. All of those things are icing on the cake, however. And so, really starting with the foundations is important. And as we talk through these, I invite people to kind of listen for one or two things. One is, like you said, what's the low-hanging fruit? What's easy? What am I already kind of doing, but I can make this small tweak and I would get even more out of it. So listen for that. And that's going to be different for each individual. And then the other thing is that big one, right? Where am I going to get the most return? Where am I going to see the biggest delta, the biggest change? And so when we talk through these things, diet, exercise, sleep, stress management, like some of the pieces that come up, diet, you and I are both big fans of the ketogenic diet, of fasting, and making that change, flipping the switch into ketosis. We have patients, and not just one, where they go from not remembering grandkids' names to remembering the grandkids' names, right? Like big differences in cognition. Many people will tell us that after getting into ketosis, they are remembering the words, they're remembering of course, the names, but they're able to engage, they're present, they're sleeping better, their mood is more stable, right? They don't have the joint pains, and now they can start exercising. So flipping that metabolic switch, that's usually a big ask, but it's a big delta. It's a big change from baseline. And then the other big one that we see that actually can feel a little easier is sleep. When we start sleeping better, so if we do it's a chore sometimes, but if we get the sleep study and then we wear the CPAP and we learn to like it, or we find that supplement, or we figure out that sleep hygiene shift that we need to make that allows us to get better sleep. Well, now there are so many things open up, right? Because now we're rested in the morning, so we make better dietary decisions. We feel less stress. We have the energy to go get the exercise. And so it really helps all of the foundational pieces. So sleep also, when we're getting better sleep, that we need high quality sleep. So if we have apnea, we're causing damage to the brain through hypoxia, these recurrent hypoxic events when our airway is closed off at night. Treating sleep apnea is absolutely crucial to brain health. We cannot miss this one. And I have watched miracles happen. I've seen patients who have single digit MoCA scores, so advanced dementia, diagnosed Alzheimer's, who recover, who double their scores, who make huge improvements, primarily because they start wearing their CPAP. That's when you really see the shift. And so this is something no one should leave on the table as an effective strategy for optimizing brain health. So addressing sleep apnea is one thing, but we need quality sleep, deep sleep and REM sleep. So deep sleep is when that glymphatic system rinses the brain. We see in the science that one night of sleep deprivation for people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, you don't have to be 65 or 85 to have this happen. One night of sleep deprivation leads to a measurable increase in the cerebral spinal fluid of amyloid plaques that are associated with Alzheimer's. So over decades, this accumulates, creates big problems. We need to get that deep sleep so that we can rinse out not just the amyloid, but also the metabolic waste that every neuron collects throughout the day, and the potential thing that we inhaled during the day, the mold toxin or the mercury that we ate with our fish. So we need to be able to get that stuff out, and it happens during deep sleep. REM sleep is just as important. It's when we're consolidating memories. It's when we're taking the emotional bite out of anything that happens, stressful events, so that we can actually recover and have that resilience to stress. So deep sleep, REM sleep, enough sleep, avoiding apnea or other sleep disorders. This is I cannot overemphasize how crucially important this is for the brain. And going through the process, so many people say to me, well, I know how important sleep is, but I can't get to sleep, or I can't stay asleep. I've suffered with insomnia. So what do I do? There's a bunch of things. There are strategies for getting to sleep. There are strategies for staying asleep. There are sleep hygiene practices and temperature and sound and light and all of these things that we can play with. And I use an Aura ring. I test and measure my sleep so that I know what's going on and how my N of one, my variables change the quality and timing of my sleep. And I highly recommend that people do that. I can't give you everything in just this short conversation, but talk to someone who is well versed in this, a functional medicine provider, a coach, a naturopath, someone who can help guide you through this so that you get the benefits of that great sleep.
Yeah, and I put out a lot of content on sleep. So if you check out drdavidjockers.com or my podcast, we talk a lot about that because it is so critical, activating that lymphatic system and really draining, detoxifying the brain. I mean, even something as simple as sleeping on your side, right? Side sleeping has been shown to significantly increase lymphatic drainage as opposed to sleeping on your back or on your stomach, right? So even just kind of the posture that you're sleeping in, super key. And I remember when I was seeing patients regularly, I would have a questionnaire, and part of the questionnaire that they would fill out to begin with is like, how do they sleep? And one question we would have on would say, do you have a light or a TV on often when you sleep, right? And I was surprised how many people actually fall asleep with their TV on.
Yeah.
That blue light, just, and most people have just not been told basic sleep hygiene, right? And so just really good sleep hygiene, getting all the lights off, right? Making it as dark as possible. Something as simple as like blue light blocking glasses at night can make a huge, I've seen it make a huge difference for people, right? You mentioned the CPAP machine. There's so many people out there with sleep apnea, one of the fastest growing conditions, underdiagnosed conditions, because you really have to go in and get a sleep study, right, in order to get it.
Yeah, although the technology has improved so that there are at-home sleep
Oh,
studies,
good.
they're not as good. They're not the gold standard, and they won't rule everything in, but you can often find sleep apnea, and it makes it much, there's less of a hurdle to basically
Mm.
getting some sort of test that then can lead to treatment. And so we use WatchPat, and I ask your provider for that because I know so many people think, oh, I have to go to this overnight sleep study. And although that is the gold standard, I would prefer if everybody did that. But I get it. You need to then arrange somebody to pick you up in the morning. You lose that night of sleep. And so you feel like hell for a day or two. And so it's just such a big ask. If we can get you the at-home one, rule in sleep apnea, and then be able to treat it, and that goes a little quicker, your brain benefits sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. So key. So good nutrition. We also know you mentioned ketogenic diet, ketones. We know that when the ketones are elevated in the bloodstream, that's going to decrease inflammation in the brain. So inflammation goes down, actually kind of shuts down the overall inflammatory amplifying system called the neuroinflammasome in the brain. It also helps balance your gas pedal, the glutamate to GABA ratio, gas pedal to brakes. So you get a smoother drive to your brain, and it increases mitochondrial energy production, which is really why that's if you have good, well-functioning brain function, if you're able to think sharply and quickly and control your emotions, it's a sign of good mitochondrial function. If you have cognitive decline, it's a sign mitochondria are dying off. They're malfunctional. They're becoming what we call senescent. So ketones, getting that elevated in the bloodstream is so key for that. So love those first two great strategies. What else can people be doing?
Yeah, so exercise is another one. And many people haven't heard about dual task exercises. Dual, DUAL, as in two. What we're doing there and suggesting is that you engage cognitively at the same time as engaging physically. So this might be as simple as walking and talking, or it could be a little bit more complicated, like going to a class where you're cued by an instructor, yoga, Pilates, jazzercise, Zumba, whatever floats your boat, getting into a class where you've got to know, like, what's my right side, what's my left foot doing, and then you've got to keep up and maybe even memorize dance steps or some kind of moves. This is really helpful. And what we see is you basically potentiate the benefits of exercise when you engage cognitively at the same time. So you get more benefits for your brain. There's been a lot of research in the stroke and traumatic brain injury space for balance, you doing balance exercises while cognitively engaged. So I've had patients, I had a great, super sweet patient. Her granddaughter was living with her, and her granddaughter was very interested she was going to nursing school, very interested in health and wellness, and would come to her visits. And we were discussing this. And so her grandma had always been an avid exerciser. She'd always gone to the classes, gone for her walks every day, jogged, done half marathons and stuff like that her whole life. But when her granddaughter heard about this, she took it and ran with it. So the first few walks they did together, she would quiz grandma on birthdays in the family and anniversaries in the family, things that were emotionally compelling to her and that she wanted to remember. And then this is dynamic. So as she regained cognitive capacity, she started quizzing her on the names of all of the neighbors and how old their kids were. And then they started identifying the trees, and then they identified the birds, and then they started learning the Latin names of them. And so they just kind of upped the intellectual ante as she got better. They also started doing more hills. So this is dynamic, right? As we increase our cognitive capacity, as we increase our cognitive capacity and our exercise capacity, we want to shift the metrics, right? We want to kind of stay engaged. So we want it hard enough that we're into it, right? We're not checking out. Like I've been to the same Pilates instructor for years, right? I know what she's going to say before she says it. So I can be thinking about my grocery list and everything else that's on my plate for that day, not engaged in the queuing. Then, so that we want to avoid. We need to stay engaged. And then the other thing we want to avoid is like the giving up because it's too hard. So, particularly if we are working with a loved one who has dementia, sometimes we want to push. I've seen spouses be like, "Come on, you knew this yesterday." And they're like upset with their loved one when they have a brain disease. And so having some compassion and engaging them at that sweet spot of like 75%, right? Where they're engaged, but they're not giving up or frustrated. When we're under stress, we just don't, our brain doesn't work as well. We want to actually be having fun. We want to be enjoying it. And that was a big part of this granddaughter grandmother duo because her granddaughter really knew what grandma liked. She had grown up in like northern Minnesota in the woods. She loved the trees, she loved the birds, and of course she loved her family. And so engaging her in those things was helpful in keeping her engaged.
Yeah, I love that. What a helpful strategy. And if you're out there and you have a family history of Alzheimer's, but you don't have cognitive decline, right now you can start taking walks with your spouse or with a friend, right? And have discussions, right? And having good intellectual discussions and having fun, laughing together, such a powerful thing. And coupling that with the movements, you're getting your exercise in while you're doing that. So good. I love that strategy.
Yeah,
What
the
else?
pickleball craze has been
Yeah,
awesome, right?
pickleball. Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
social, it's often outside. There's strategy involved, there's hand-eye coordination. Ballroom dancing is another one. You're engaged with the music, you're engaged with a partner, so you're spatially aware. You have to remember the steps. So there's lots of different ways to do this, and I invite people to just like brainstorm and get creative with it. But think about that. How do I engage both cognitively and physically at the same time?